Lab, where we break down the art and science of storytelling. My name is Rain Bennett. I am your host, and I'm a filmmaker and an author on a quest to understand how we can tell better stories so that we can do better work and make the world a better place. Each episode, I host one of the world's best storytellers to help you understand how to leverage storytelling to increase your sales, deepen your connections, and serve your audiences better. Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode, and I hope that you love it. Jay, my new friend, welcome to the Storytelling Lab.
Hey, Rain. Thanks for having me, bud.
Yeah, appreciate it. Just before we launched, I always get into conversations with guests beforehand, and then we start getting into the good stuff, and I have to remind myself, wait, let's save it for the people. But we were kind of about to approach the subject of dismantling historic narratives, right? Which is a perfect setup for what we're going to talk about today. So you sent me your book, Conscious Bible Stories, or one of them out of the series about Cain and Abel. So I just want to jump right into it. What is your goal here? What exactly is or are conscious Bible stories? What's your plan?
Yeah, I guess my vision for this is to be able to show people how you can take stories apart and put them back together the way that it empowers you. And so I grew up in a household, in a religious household, Christian stories. We all know the stories. And, as I grew up and I dismantled these stories for myself, I realized that these stories were kind of setting us up to believe something within ourselves that was limiting, to expand our vision to where we're going and where we're coming from. And these stories mean a lot to me because they're a significant part of my life. They're from childhood. We've been fed these stories, and they've impregnated me with this belief of where we come from. Meaning, I believe at some point I came from the descendants of a brother who killed his brother and who was just riddled with guilt and resentment. And we continue this story. If you look outward to what our life is involved in, these stories still play a big role in our life. Whether you're a Christian or not, we know the Cain and Abel story. And it's not so much given to us as fiction. It's given to us as a story, as like, this is where you come from. Like, this is humanity. From the very beginning, we've been imposed with a story. And once I realized that these stories are, for the most part, irrelevant to our day to day, I asked myself, why wouldn't we tell ourselves a story that would empower us rather than disempower us and show us, some sort of, like we're stuck in this loop of Cain, where we're just riddled with guilt and shame and regret. And we've all felt that, where we say something or we do something and we instantly regret it. And I believe it has something to do with these stories that have been told to us, where we're just acting before we're even thinking consciously about what these stories even mean to us. And so that's why I take these stories apart and put them back together in this way, where at the very least, this is how I feel the stories should be, at the very least for myself.
You had said something earlier about, these stories had impregnated you, and you were kind of alluding to your journey, just probably through childhood, adolescence, and into adulthood. And I've found that, and I'm asking about the spiritual journey specifically, but what I have found is that whatever narrative you're subscribing to as a kid, whether it was kind of imparted upon you from your parents, or you picked it up just from people picking on you one day at school, whatever story we tell ourselves, right? Let's call it that. I grew up in a Christian household too. So this is why I was interested to talk to you, because I've also been fed these stories, and I've been through my own journey, which is its own, ups and downs of, when I was younger, rebellious, to organized religion. And then you grow older, you start to have kids yourself, and no matter where you land, there is a evolution, there is a transformation, right? So talk to me about, you can talk about your specific journey through that, but I'd also like to expand and just think and talk about how the story we tell ourselves changes over time.
Well, these stories, I came to the conclusion years ago that these stories didn't belong to me anymore.
Mm.
And as guilty as I felt during this process, a lot of that guilt was alleviated when I began talking to my parents about it. Because growing up, I actually had to hide a lot of the things that I wanted to do because I knew it wasn't acceptable.
Oh,
I was like a bad kid, you know? And and so I had to hide. And I got to a point, probably somewhere in my mid-20s, where I didn't wanna hide anymore, and the only way out of this uncomfortable space that I found myself in was to express myself to the people whom meant most to me, which are my parents.
yeah.
And luckily, they're still in my life, and they play a big role in my life still. And I've been able to also play a big role in their life by expressing how I feel about these stories. And little by little, I've been able to unravel what these stories mean to me. And I've seen it in my life how it's created a really open dialogue with my parents that I didn't have growing up.
Man.
And so I feel lighter, I
Yeah.
feel freer, and all I did was share my thoughts that I was scared to share before with the people who meant most to me. And it unlocked something because before I was very timid, very shy, very difficult for me to express my thoughts. And as soon as I expressed my deepest thoughts to the people I was most afraid to share them with, it unlocked something within me.
Mm.
And I've never been the same. And I've gone through a lot of experiences, plant medicine, ayahuasca, and these things have definitely helped. But just within my own family, I've been able to express thoughts and stories that have unleashed something within not just myself, but within my family. I haven't seen my parents like this. And we had something heavy happen in our family a few years ago, which is my brother died. And this was a moment that I realized within myself that I had to like step up for the family. And I'm the youngest one. So it's like, it's not my, I felt like it wasn't my role to do so, but it also felt like I'm the only one that can do it because nobody else is doing it.
Hmm.
And so because of this, uh, I've seen the relationship with my parents blossom in their ripened age, and I'm a grown man now, and I can't express how significant this has been for me. Just the ability to express these thoughts to these people who have come so far and came from a certain place, and for them to actually be receptive and not shun me away because that's what I was so afraid of. I thought I was going to get shunned away. And so it was like I had to face my fear and do it anyway because I didn't
Hmm.
know what was going to happen.
Absolutely. And major respect to your parents for being receptive, because often they're not, right? If they have a certain perspective on things, their beliefs, and if you're happening to challenge those in any way, it's not always easy. Uh, what year was it that you lost your brother?
This was 21.
Yeah. Can I ask what month?
It was August.
Okay. So not that I am excited about this coincidence, but I lost my brother in October of that year, and I'm also the youngest one. So, uh, deep connection, that I felt there, and I'm really glad that you stepped up for your family. You know, what is your perspective on religion or spirituality currently? Or what's the evolution that you've gone through from the things that you were taught to becoming that 20-year-old to becoming who you are now?
I would consider myself not necessarily religious in the
Uh-huh.
sense of I don't follow a certain religion. Uh, I'm intrigued by people's beliefs
Mm-hmm.
and building relationships with people who and building these relationships to the point where we we feel so comfortable with each other where we express these what I would consider spiritual enlightenments.
Mm-hmm.
I believe we all have it within ourselves to share very enlightening moments for ourselves. And we just need to feel like we're in a safe space where we're not going to get attacked. And so, luckily, I've been able to harness relationships in my life where these stories uh, are very prevalent, where people feel comfortable with me. I feel comfortable with the people in my life to share what we believe to be uh, the truth, quote unquote. And that truth is ever evolving. And I believe that's a spiritual journey within itself.
Mm-hmm.
I think that these stories from the Bible, whether it be a Christian Bible or the Quran or name the religion, I think that these stories are meaningful.
Yeah.
They stem from somewhere where they want to show you something. These stories, and whether you want them to affect you or not, they're affecting you.
Yeah.
And when you have close bonds in your life, these these stories become evident in the people in your life, and it gets to the point where there's no longer a need to hide what you believe. You build these bonds with people in your life where it becomes significant to be able to express what you really believe, whether that belief is fleeting or whether that belief is bonded within yourself to the point where you can't let it go. And that's my spiritual journey. I feel like these stories mean something until they don't. And within my life, I love to get to the point, and it takes a while when you're especially with somebody new. It takes a while to get to the point where you can ask these questions and people feel comfortable. And I've been grateful enough to, even with my sisters, with my parents, with my close friends, where I can have these discussions about religion, spirituality, and it's this realm that we don't quite understand, but we're all very gravitated to
Mm-hmm.
expressing these feelings within ourselves that there's something else, whether that be God, whether that be the devil, whether that be light and dark. To me, there's it's just words at this point. Like what do you want?
Absolutely.
What do you want
Yeah.
to express?
Yeah. Absolutely. I'll just speak from my personal journey. You know, my response to the structure and kind of authoritative nature of organized religion when I was a kid is what I rebelled against, and the closed mindedness, I would call it. But then through my journey, I realized that me being closed off to any thought about, the world, the universe that I had was equally closed minded, right? Like not being open to the possibilities of what might be out there, how I might view things is kind of how, and as a teenager in early 20s, I was. Now I'm in my early 40s and things have shifted where I agree with what you said. Like it's just words. They're kind of always been words to describe the same thing. And I don't think the science or, religion are mutually exclusive by any means. I think it's just it's really talking about the same thing, energy, right? And there's a lot to say for every civilization, arguably, since the beginning of mankind, having some form of belief in what all this is, what it all means. But something you had said about, doesn't matter where these stories come from. It's also interesting to me. A lot of these different religions, you see the same stories kind of pop up, or very, very similar stories, right? So what do you think that we can learn positively from these stories from the past? This could be actually history too, but certainly religious stories, mythology, right? Like, what are things that we can now in the current day and age learn from these stories from the past, even though you obviously argue that we can dismantle them and rewrite them as well? What can we pull positively from these stories from the past?
Absolutely. I think these stories are showing us what we don't like about ourselves.
Hmm.
Put simply, that's what I really believe. I believe these stories that we've been told, whether it be Cain killing his brother Abel, are showing us exactly what we're capable of and the worst part about ourselves. I it's hard to tell. I'm not a I'm not a historian or scholar, but I think that these stories, they weren't written in English the way we know today. It was symbols and sounds and numbers, and they're showing us probably the worst part about ourselves so that we can reflect, because that's what I think these stories are. They're showing us the deepest part about ourselves in a reflection. We are capable of the worst case scenario, and yet most of us don't act on it. That should show you who you are and what you're made of. That should show you that you're capable of so much terrible things, just the way these stories are reflecting, and yet most of us don't. Doesn't that show you that you're greater than the story that you're being told? And that's why I take these stories apart, and I just show the best part about myself. The best part that I can show is reflecting these stories. And in a mirror, when we look in the mirror, it's opposite what we see. Left is right, right is left, but it looks the same. I think these stories are here to show us what we're capable of at a great level. But it just takes effort, conscious effort.
Let's talk about a little bit about your journey with the books. First of all, why did you select children's books as the avenue? Was that to rewrite your own children's narrative, or the narrative that you had when you were a child, or what was your thinking behind that?
Yeah. Thank you for asking that. I feel like I'm talking to myself when I'm writing these stories as a kid. I'm
Yeah.
talking to my child myself, and giving myself sort of that clearing up the misunderstanding within myself when I was a kid, that I felt that I couldn't clear up with my parents at the time.
Hmm.
I couldn't ask these questions because when I did, it was frowned upon. I couldn't question God. I couldn't question the word of God. Uh, but I can question it now. I can question myself. I can question my decisions. Why wouldn't I be able to question these stories? And when I began to do that, I began to see the stories for what they were. And they're just stories. It's just a story being told. And so why not tell myself a story that I would enjoy being that character? Nobody wants to be Cain, and nobody really wants to be Abel because he dies. He
Right.
dies in the story. So no, we're being told a story, and nobody wants to play the characters. What kind of story is that? I want to be told a story where I see myself as the character. And
Yeah.
when I tell myself these stories, like the story I shared with you, thank you for reading it, the Cain and Abel, I love both of those characters. I would be comfortable playing both of those characters.
Yeah, I agree with that. I read it with my kid too, my daughter. I have two kids, but my daughter's 6. We read it together as well. And I mean, personally, I like the kind of point that you landed on there with that God is within you, that concept. Because even when I was young and I was like 12 and finally starting to push back, and ultimately what led me, I mean, I was already involved in things I shouldn't be involved with at that age. I had an older brother, I was doing things that weren't Christian like. And so I just remember feeling like a hypocrite and just saying, I don't behave as a Christian. I don't think subscribe to this philosophy, these beliefs. But yeah, I always had the thought though that like it was an individual's journey. Like God to me is not the same as God to you. I don't know why I had that thought, and I'm not trying to make myself sound super profound at a young age. I just thought that we all had our individual journeys. But I was also always told that Jesus lives within inside you. He's in your heart, right? But no one actually like lived in that. They were like, no, 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 we're all going to go to Sunday school. We're all going to do the same thing. And I'm just like, but that's not an individual journey through spirituality or religion. And I think that people are, coming around to that belief more. I think that your journey through religion is yours and mine is mine. And yeah, you kind of landed on a similar theme or philosophy there at the end. And I really like that because now that I'm older and I can look back and realize that, okay, I'm just rebelling against any authoritative institution at that age. Now I really do believe that. It's like, I see beauty in the world. I think that's attributed to something. I don't think that, as I said earlier, that it's mutually exclusive to science. Science, that those theories are amazingly beautiful to me as well. So back to the book, which is a heck of a journey. Like that's a leap itself, like, okay, I want to do something with this. I've lived through this. I want to write this book. And I'm going to write it, as a children's book with the idea of it being, rewriting the stories I was told as a kid. What's the response been like so far?
It's been really positive, Rain. It
That's
really
awesome.
has. I really questioned whether it would be received at all, and
Right.
I kind of tippy toed, you know, telling my close friends about it, and little by little, it was just being well received. Like once I was able to express myself because I did it with people whom I felt comfortable with. Well, then I got to the point where, hey, I can talk to you. I just met you a few minutes ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I always have like this little, by the way, everybody asks me that same question because, because I suspect that they feel like these thoughts would be shut down.
Yeah.
But at this point, look, I already confronted my biggest fear, which was my parents. And so from here, it's like I'm I'm in the black. Like I've already won.
Right.
And so any negative review I get, like it doesn't bother me at all. But also I don't get them. I don't get negative reviews. Um, I get questions, and but I get them from people who are actually able to have a conversation. And for the most part, I have been able to express these thoughts to the best of my ability, and it's been well received. And I'm not trying to change your beliefs.
Yeah.
All I'm doing is sharing a story from my point of view. And I think that, I'll share this. When I was the religion that I grew up in was Jehovah's Witness.
Oh, okay.
Jehovah is God, and witness, we know what that is. It's like you're testifying to what you see. And so God is another word for truth. It's like it doesn't have to be your truth. It doesn't have to, you don't have to agree with it. But it is my duty to tell you what I see. Because the same way that I need to know what you see,
Mm-hmm.
I need you to tell me what you see. Because we're seeing different things. We have different perspectives. And I think we're building something. We're on our way somewhere, whether it be space travel. We're moving, we're going somewhere, we're moving forward, and I need to know where you're coming from and where you're going. And if we align, then we work together to go where we're going in the most efficient manner possible. And that's what I think we're doing. And if I find somebody who disagrees, or maybe they agree, most people do agree, or to some level, but they're just not on the same journey. It doesn't mean we have to go together. It just means we came across this point. You shared your point of view. You allowed me to share my point of view, and we will continue to move forward. I would encourage people to talk to your parents, like talk to the people you're afraid of. Like these are the stories in the Bible. Like when you're growing, like the Abraham story. Like you get to the point where you're old enough. It's time to leave your home. It's time to go into the unknown, into the darkness. This is what we're afraid of. And we don't want to confront it. It's uncomfortable. We
Hmm.
like staying in what we know, which is the light, because the light is nice. But if you want to grow, you need to go beyond the darkness through the pain.
What is it? I think it was Joseph Campbell. I think this is very hero's journey esque. That was like the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek.
Yeah,
I'm that's the gist of it. I'm not plagiarizing, paraphrasing that, but yeah, I mean that the cave you fear to enter, that's the hero's journey, and you have to go through that darkness. Absolutely, that's well said. And so that's the thing. I think often people they're scared to, and that's understandable, but because they're scared to, a lot of times they don't, and they stay right there where it's nice and comfy, and they never kind of venture out to go through that. And I think that we can't evolve as people until we do that. Still, you had these not second guesses, but you were wondering what your friends might say when you had this epiphany and wanted to write this book or these series of books. Who, besides at least inadvertently your parents, were some of your champions during that time that helped you? Because this is still a big project, and a lot of my listeners have an idea, a story they want to tell or retell, like in your case, and that's a big, bold, story or journey for them to go out on. So I always find that there are certain people that help you get to certain mile markers on that path. Were there any people along your journey that really helped you bring this vision to a reality?
absolutely. One person that comes to mind, probably the most significant person, was one of my closest friends still today, whom when we met, probably somewhere 17, 18 years old, uh, he's atheist, doesn't believe in God, would mock me, make fun of me. But here's the thing, Rain, I don't get offended by things easily. And so we became closer because of it, because I found it funny. I thought it was cute. I thought that because he wasn't trying to hurt me, I can
Right.
tell that. Um, but he's still a good friend. So he pokes, a good friend pokes.
Indeed.
Uh, and so, but I've seen his transition from believing himself to be atheist to believing it in God, and
Mm.
him admitting to me that he didn't even really know what that meant. And so we've grown together. We're grown men. I'm 40 now, and I think he's 40 also, 41. Um, and he's been kind of like the one character who's been super consistent in his growth and very open to having these conversations with me, and has been a big role in me being able to express my ideas comfortably, because uh, the worst that he could do is just poke at him. And
Yeah.
but it made me better, because he took him apart. Like he poked at it, he questioned me, and and then it got to the point where I was I found the answers. Because he asked the questions, I looked for the answers. Maybe it wasn't right away. We lived together for a long time. We were roommates for probably over 10 years. And, he's a police officer in Los Angeles. And we just grew a lot together. He would take me on ride-alongs, and we just bonded very well. And he would help me grow, and I would help him grow. And here we are. We're grown ass men.
It's so important to have those relationships with someone who doesn't come from where you come from or doesn't believe what you believe. I mean, and I think that we're losing that a little bit, or I fear that we're losing that a little bit. And social media isn't helping, where people just kind of stay in their echo chambers. But when I was in college, I worked at UPS part time, and I was on the sort aisle, meaning people would unload the trucks as fast as they can, and we would sort them to different color coded belts depending on their zip codes. And so you'd be standing beside, 30 other people at 30 doors at a conveyor belt at your waist, and standing beside the same people all night. And there was a seminary school close by, so a lot of those students worked at UPS, which was funny because it was a bunch of drug addicts and a bunch of like soon to be preachers working on the sort aisle together. But I had a friend like that too, who he used to be big into like metal and Rage Against the Machine, and then he kind of became a Christian, and we would debate back and forth all night while we were throwing boxes to different color coded conveyor belts. But that's all it was when we were pushing each other, right? And now I feel like, I know I'm generalizing here, that we get so offended that then as soon as someone questions, psh, we're done. We shut the door to the conversation. But we were stuck together all night long for 4-hour shift, and so we would have serious debates, but we would high five and hug after that and go home, and it was totally fine. And you said this point about your friend where he now he believes in God and he didn't even really understand what that meant. I think that line is so important because you don't have to.
Right.
There's nothing telling you that you have to understand what it means or what you actually believe. I believe it's an ever evolving thing. However, the stories that we have been told seem to say, like, no, this is what being Christian looks like, and this is the only way it looks. And I just find that to be so, I don't know, limiting, wrong. When you have 8 billion people on the planet, and we all come from different backgrounds and experiences, and therefore have different perspectives. How could there be one size fits all? It never made sense to me. So I love that line that you said about, he doesn't understand what that means. I'm like, yeah, how could you? And
Right.
it changes, and you don't have to, not at all.
Exactly.
What's the future? So Conscious Bible Stories is a children's book series. Do you see that? Do you want that to turn into something else? Do you plan to do more of these? What's the future vision?
I've written 5 stories, and I'm publishing them backwards. I ended at the Cain and Abel story because I think that was a real significant point for humanity into what I see playing out in our reality
Mm-hmm.
today. It's anger and resentment being played out day in and day out, and I see it within myself. Just like it's my first act is like just anger, just like. But then as soon as I think about it, I'm like, why am I even angry? And
Mm-hmm.
so I'm working backwards, and it through the Adam and Eve stories, and through the introduction of God and Lucifer. And the Bible starts in the beginning, and my stories start before the beginning, which is the relationship between God and Lucifer and how that came about. It's probably the story I'm most proud of and most afraid to share, which is why I'm working backwards. Uh, because it's just like, it means so much to me, and I'm not sure what it would mean. It's like heavy to me still,
Yeah.
and I wrote it years ago already,
Oh
so
wow.
it's still significant. As a matter of fact, I haven't done these podcasts in a while, just because I've been traveling and I've been super busy. I got married. My wife's pregnant. Like I'm having my first kid, so I'm going through a lot. And just last night, to prepare for this podcast with you, Rain,
Mm-hmm.
I shared this story with my wife, and it was the first time I've read this story in over a year, and it just means so much to me. And I can see my wife's reaction to it. I've told her about the stories. I've shared but I've never read her the story. And usually at night, she's telling me, she's pregnant, so she's telling me how uneasy the baby feels. Like she's like
Mm.
kicking, and but last night when I read that story, it was just calm.
Oh man.
And my wife fell asleep, and the baby fell asleep like at 8 p.m. And I just had all this freedom. I was like, I was like, wow. It's just significant to me, and
That's
I
sweet.
can't wait to share it. I can't wait to share. I can't wait till it's published. We're not quite there yet. The only hesitation is not a hesitation. The only delay is uh, the art, getting
Yeah,
the art
dude.
right to
That's a whole
match
different beast. Yeah,
the
yeah,
whole.
yeah. And the art was really good on those, and I've seen people comment on that too. People like the art, so yeah, nothing wrong with taking your time on that to get it right. Absolutely. You said I saw this line. I think it's on your website that really struck a chord with me. I want to talk about it a little bit before we go, but I am glad that we've talked about your parents a lot because I have lately been circling around this concept of intergenerational connection and conversation, which I think that we avoid or put blocks up, or there are barriers inherently. But I think there's so much we can learn from that cross generation or intergeneration communication. And I actually have a startup that is capturing family stories and turning them into film. So it's also something I'm very passionate about. So people are learning from their grandparents. We're talking about historic stories today. You're talking about breaking down these divides between you and your parents and finally feeling comfortable and vulnerable with them. So the line was, it only takes one generation to create an unrecognizable world. It's on your website, so I'm assuming that you know what I'm talking about. Can you elaborate on that and tell me what you mean by that? And that's just a piece of the quote. There's like a paragraph. Just curious.
Yeah. Well, we're telling stories to each other, right? These stories stem from where we're coming from,
Mm-hmm.
and they're showing you where we're going. If you notice at the end of the Cain and Abel book that I shared with you, at the end of it, it says, these are our ascendants, which should be the word descendants, because that's where we come from.
Mm-hmm.
And I change it to ascendants because I feel we're trapping ourselves with the words we tell ourselves by saying we're descending when I feel we're ascending. We're moving up. We're showing you the best of ourselves, the greatest part about ourselves. This is an ascension. And so the dissension is an old story, what I would call antiquated, because, but important. I'm not diminishing it because it got us to the point where we realize something about ourselves. The most important parts about ourselves in our life is when we start to question where we come from. Some people believe God knows everything except for where God came from. And I believe that where we come from is a very important part of expressing where we're going. You know, like in a map, you want to go somewhere, but where are you coming from? And if we're able to express these ideas and be able to change direction and draw it out in a map, we can all have this story of greatness because these stories aren't meant to shut us down. They're designed for us to break through. And I believe these stories, they seem like they're setting us up to fail. I don't believe that. I believe these stories led me to these conclusions so that I can break myself out and change the story the way I see fit. Because the only thing holding me under the jurisdiction of that story is my belief in it. And the moment that I change my belief, the same way that I change my clothing when they're out of style, that's when you can just break through and create whichever story is greatest for you. And that's why one of the things resonated that you said a little while ago is like, well, what does God mean to you? It's it's whatever it means to you, whether that be, whatever the devil means to you. I don't believe the devil is evil. I think that these stories of evil are designed for us to break through the darkness into the light. And that's what the devil is. It's probably the greatest part about us because what's the light without the dark? You
Don't
can't
exist.
really see. It's like you're blind. And so the dark is just there to show you what you're made of, who you are at your core. And it's okay if it hurts. It's okay if it hurts.
A word. You know what I love about this is it's not even just religion. The concepts and themes that we're discussing right now are individual evolution, and they touch on so many different aspects of life. Right? It's not just not just our spiritual journeys either. And so I love where you're taking this here. If you had somebody, no matter if it's their religious journey or spiritual journey or something else, if you had someone who has a desire to want to change either the story they tell themselves, which could be holding them back, and they're afraid to go into that cave we mentioned, or the stories they've been told, what would be your first bit of advice for that? Like, where does that person start when they're like, they have the realization perhaps, and they want to make the change and reconfigure how they view these things? It's still a tall task, right? It's not easy. It took you a long time. It does take a long time, and you have to go through this dark cave. What do you tell that person at the very first step?
If they're already contemplating that, it's already their first step.
Fair
And
point.
I would say the next after that is find somebody you can say it to, because things sound differently when you say them out loud than when you say them to yourself.
Big time.
And so that's when you refine your message. You're refining who you are. It's like you're chipping away, questioning yourself, and you need somebody. That's why we need each other. There's no escape. You need somebody to be able to say these things to. You can't keep it inside. Like, that's what it's all about. If we're unable to express these thoughts to people in our life, it's going to be really hard for us to manifest the world that we really see. If you can't sell it to somebody else, you're not buying it. And that's what stories are all about. Like, we're creating value, right? We're creating stories that are valuable. And if they're not valuable to anybody else, they're not really valuable. So you, and so it's like like we used to use stones as money, right? Well,
Yeah.
that's not really valuable anymore because nobody wants it. What
Mm.
makes it valuable is that people are buying it. And these are our ideas, your stories. And that's all we're doing all day long is buying and selling stories. There's really nothing else. Money is not what you think it is. It's not dollars or euros. It's your ability to buy and sell words where you're profitable at the end of it.
Love that. Last question. You said you have I was going to say a kid coming up. That sounds so terrible. A kid on the way.
Yeah.
When's the baby due, by the way?
December, end of December.
Okay. Well, enjoy that nice night of peace and quiet you had after you read the story to your wife the other night. How has your perspective on all this changed now that you will, soon be a father yourself?
Honestly, I previously felt like I wasn't capable of expressing this message because who am I to write children's books when I don't have children? That's something that's always been on my mind.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but I've also until recently didn't feel like I was ready for that. And so now I've felt ready, and now it's coming to fruition, and I feel like I'm just moving forward in the story that I created for myself. And I'm genuinely proud of myself. Because I've come so far,
Yeah.
and here I am. And that's all the story is. And it continues.
Oh my God, that's the perfect. Like you summed it up perfectly. I've come so far, and here I am, and that's the story. Oh man, I love that so much. Before we go, where's the easiest place that people can find it? I know it's on Amazon. Where else can people find the stories?
Uh, yeah, it's mostly on Amazon, consciousbiblestories.com also. Uh, at Conscious Bible Stories on Instagram. That's it.
Well, man, Jay, I appreciate you. This has been a great conversation, a unique episode for us. But I gotta say, man, I'm proud of you too. It's a bold move, and I get all the things that you question about it, but it takes a lot to follow that vision. And that's why I was really excited to have you on the show, because a lot of people are in similar situations, maybe not the same story. But I knew that you were taking a leap, and you've created something very cool and amazing. And I shared it with my children, so I appreciate you very much.
I appreciate you too, Rain. I really appreciate you having me on and talking things out with me.
Yeah, brother. Glad to be connected. I'll talk to you soon.